Welcome everyone, Simon here from the Whales of Wall Street, an XDC video for you guys today. This is an interesting topic over the last couple of weeks, particularly coming out of the recent sort of financial events over in Texas. Andre Kosterman has been quite busy with the narratives coming out, heavily relating to really interesting moves around Tradeteq, which is of course on the XDC network. And the ability for globalization of tokenized bonds, yield mechanisms, and of course looking at the real world asset side of things as well. So we're going to a few of those aspects of topics. Before we do so, please, of course, if you haven't done already, make sure you smash that subscribe button, and of course help the channel out by hitting that big thumbs up, the like button as well. It massively helps the channel keep progressing, pushing forwards. We smashed through the 10,000 mark recently, so thank you so much for your support on that. And yeah, we're looking forward to the next milestones with you guys. So let's go straight into these interesting topics coming out over the last week or so. Now, the XDC price point, which we'll go onto in the chart shortly, did rise slightly after this news kind of came out a couple of days ago. Our apologies, I've been away with work and everything. And doing some interesting work around PIST, actually. This is the new regulation stuff around artificial intelligence, etc. So really interesting things coming out of that, which I'll do a video on in the next week or so. But yes, the tokenized US Treasuries arrive to XDC network as digital bond market grows. Now, this is quite a massive market, guys. We talked about this in a multitude of different videos over recent times. So the tokenization of real-world assets such as government bonds, and these real-world assets, guys, aren't just about financial aspects or institutions at all. You can very much talk about any formality of physical asset being converted to a tokenized variant, if for a better word. There's some interesting projects out there like Boson Protocol, which I came across a few years ago. I actually had an interview with them. Didn't go well, obviously. Well, it did go well. It was just it was one of those things, timing, etc. But really interesting. That was the first possible area where I understood a bit more about physical NFT application. Albeit NFTs wasn't really a terminology back then, but I think we'll definitely move away from those kind of terminologies as time goes by, and they'll just pretty much just be called normal things. And that's kind of like the detriment to the success of blockchain and tokenization of real world assets, etc. is the day that we stop talking about them, and they just are what they are, and we as end users will just treat them as normal. But this relating back is, we talk about like trade finance, supply chain management, we talk about the tokenization of things like houses, etc. And this aspect of things is worth essentially $5 trillion growth, dollars worth. Like, it's absolutely massive opportunity. And of course, this heavily relates to this aspect of USTY. So this is around the US Treasury yield tokens being available on the Tradeteq platform, as we know, is operating on the XDC network. So this is where we get the relation to XDC and a bit more formality in our minds as to why XDC is such an interesting project to know about and to hold in our portfolios. For me personally, I've been holding XDC for some time. I accumulate as much as I can where I can possible, especially in the dips. I'm not looking to sell XDC for a number of years, especially with these integrations pushing forward and these utilizations pushing forward as well. And I truly believe that 2025 to 2030, as we achieve these sustainable goals, ESG goals, the trade finance goals leading up to 2030, the UN program initiative, if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's very much around the Agenda 30, some people call it. It's a massive document, huge, that you can download off the UN website. And it's got loads of different areas, diversification, social aspects, finance aspects, ESGs, in terms of the environment, etc. And it's really interesting to read through all of that. As we approach this level of target, if you like, for over 160 countries signed this back in 2015. This was in conjunction with and addition to the Agenda 21 program, which obviously finished around 2020, 2021. All these things come into accumulation. That's why I'm very excited about that particular period of time and beyond that. So, of course, I'm sure there's opportunity in the next 2024, 2025 bull run. Supposedly around that sort of mark would be the next bull run, to take advantage, of course, from the existing price points that we've got. But the point being is that we're in a really intricate, detailed area right now of going from talking to actual framework integration and utilization of these areas of interest, and particularly in finance. We've done many videos now over the last month or so about the trade finance digitalization here in the UK, about the regulation towards the use and retail use of cryptocurrency, digital currencies, etc. But now we're going a step further, where we really get into the nitty-gritty parts of humongous amounts of money, opportunities, and companies drawing into the fact that they can now tokenize assets, but also tokenize finance within bonds. And we look at this as maybe a massive cost saving to an extent, whereby a lot of companies or institutions or even individuals with a lot of money would rely on things like brokers, and of course now the interaction with artificial intelligence, and of course now the aspects of all of these ETFs coming into fruition, which we've got a multitude of videos coming out over the next few days about that as well, particularly around Bitcoin and Ethereum leading the way on that side of things. There's a multitude of chains at the moment. Polygon is one, Matic, we know of Polygon. We've got Ethereum doing their thing, Stellar, XLM. We know of like Avalanche, for example, really heavily involved in these treasury bond aspects, or creating frameworks for banks and institutional level areas of that as well. So there's all these things, really exciting things going on, and now XDC is putting its name into the hat. And it's credit really to a lot of the advisory boards. Andre's on that team, and many other people in the space relating to XinFin as a network are really pushing this massively. And here's something quite interesting. The demand for tokenized treasuries has grown nearly sixfold to 622 million this year alone, which is absolutely staggering amount of numbers compared to where we were before. And as I mentioned, as I just spoke about just a second ago, in regards to some of the other chains involved in all these areas as well, as mentioned with a couple of others that perhaps aren't listed here. Big banking institution, financial institutions like JP Morgan, etc. We talked about SBI in, I think, not in the last XDC video, maybe the one before that, the integration of that, particularly with Japan. So you can start seeing there's a huge area of opportunity here in terms of valuation of a market area coming into fruition. And this whole narrative around how big this market actually really is worth. And certainly over these next few years, as the continuation development occurs. And let's not forget, guys, the conversations around stablecoins and CBDCs. And in fact, we mentioned here not just about the 5 years of $5 trillion worth of tokenization. We've also got the integration of things like stablecoins and the CBDCs, the central bank digital currencies, which, as I mentioned earlier, have here in the UK as a prime example being passed through to be able to be used, and for the ability of regulation to be formulated around that. And then our utilization probably from 2025 onwards is what I predict all the time, November 2025 in particular, purely because the RTGS system is supposed to switch on from that time. It had moved previously, I think, from the February to the November 2025. It might change again, but that's at least an area of interest for me personally, and that's why I believe that the next big bull cycle will be heavily evolved around that, as more news develops, more pilots get signed off around the world around these kind of initiatives and frameworks for us to use in the future. So we've got all these great big huge things occurring worldwide, guys. This is not just the UK. I mentioned UK purely because of that news coming out. We know the US is very close to signing all of that kind of stuff off in terms of laws and things as well, and the rest of the world will follow. And in fact, if you look at the Asian markets, or indeed Russia, they're very far ahead in CBDC application and trialing. They've been doing it for years, and they're certainly in operation right now. There's some really big case studies, particularly when I think it was the Olympics a year or so ago in China was a great example of the usage of that and how many people were utilizing that digital money. So that's talking about the usage of money in general, but from the government bonds aspect, this is absolutely gigantic. And this is a great example. This was an article back from February originally, but updated in May. Siemens, now this is a huge electronic company. They do all sorts, really. We do our traffic lights, which is a bit random, but predominantly heavily involved in things like telecom side of things. So they used to do phones, and I don't know if they still do, but they certainly do like the cell development of 5G technology and loads of other cool stuff as well. But of course, when you relate IoT and 5G and blockchain and AI, it starts to make sense how that goes down. But look at this. 60 million euros or $64 million, I'm getting my words out there, were issued on the Polygon blockchain in terms of a 1 year yielding aspect or maturity aspect in a bond. And realizing the aspect of tokenization of this is reducing paperwork, it's reducing time, it's increasing efficiency, they're removing things like brokers, etc. So it's a lot more applicable to many businesses and people that hold assets in various ways, and to tokenize them. Of course, you've got the technology of blockchain for the verification, the processing, the transparency, etc. The speed at which all of this can be done and the transfers of money, etc. Really does come into play. And this is going to be something quite interesting to keep an eye on as well, is the Securities Act. Now, there's huge data acts and things going through as well. But this one in particular came enforced in 2021. So it opened up really the regulation and the regulatory power for companies and businesses to really operate in these areas and utilize this form of technology and this form of financial bond yielding. Now, a lot of companies you'll probably see now as time goes by and these years go by is they will tokenize assets. They won't just tokenize assets, they'll tokenize their money within their companies into the formalities of blockchain, because they see the yield opportunity that can arise from some of these applications. We know, like when we look at Tradeteq or the Tradeteq, when we covered that video a while back of, I can't remember the percentage, I think it's like 7% of being able to yield the euro versus those tokens, which is quite phenomenal, really. And that's just for general users as well. You can imagine that from a business perspective versus the interest rates that are probably on offer at the moment aren't always fantastic. But certainly from that loan aspect or holding money in a certain ETF or a banking holding system and making money off that in a tokenized, secure, efficient way with the utilization of things like DLT blockchain becomes really fascinating topic furthermore. But yes, absolutely huge opportunities with not just the market application to this, the value of this is huge. But the fact of the matter is that more and more companies and businesses will be using this. The utility is huge over these coming years. And it's great to see that XDC is really formulating itself. We knew when we first did the original videos of XDC about its capabilities in both the private and the domestic sectors. But it's clear as day that fast forward 2-3 years of how much development and progress has been made. And that might not reflect the price point. It's a really interesting topic, which we'll go on to in a second as we talk about that in a bit more detail. But the world is really changing, guys. The world is really changing. And this has been going on for a number of years in terms of the financial aspects, the Great Reset, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and all these household names that we know within finance are really switching fully now to the tokenized aspects of the network, the DLT technology, tokenization of everything, and then our ability as end users, once all these kind of like trials and things are put in place, we'll just be using this as normal. And it's really fascinating to see, of course, PayPal, Coinbase, etc. that's going on at the moment. Twitter. I think one of our first ever videos was Elon Musk will probably take Twitter and he'll change it into a digital identity platform and the utilization of crypto trading. There's no doubt in my mind, and probably the Dogecoin will be very heavily utilized in that area. So these developments are really exciting. They're interesting. As a holder of some of these cryptocurrency projects in our portfolios, understanding utility is very important, and to understand as well the time scales, the time frames of where we are with everything. So you can imagine this is great big news, and you'd probably expect an explosion on the price point, but it's not quite happening because we are still in a bear market, a winter market. We've got a lot of macro events still going on around the world, of course. But it's a great opportunity to talk about that in a bit more detail when we look at the price point of XDC, currently floating around 5.6 cents. Now, it did have a bit of an uprise, as I said, with the news that came out quite recently. Very interesting indeed that we drew, go and check the last video, we drew all these wonderful circles and lines around about a potential movement of XDC. Now, obviously, I didn't know about this announcement coming out the last few days, but I was anticipating at least because of the uprise that we did have from these lower regions around 3.2 cents all the way up to around nearly 10 cents. And we equated in those price range movements that actually when we lose that 50 to 70% reduction, you'll start to see traders come in and take advantage of that. But of course, that was heavily evolved around the news, and then we're formulating ourselves back down. Not saying as a prediction, but it's really interesting to see some of this coming out into fruition from the last video that we did on XDC. So kudos. But I think the main thing out of this is trying to formulate a narrative to people out there that are either new to XDC or have been holding it for a long time and perhaps maybe not interested. Maybe they're not interested in how technology advances with blockchain and things. They just want to know, why is the price not going this, that, and blah, 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 blah. Is it a scam, etc., etc. We've gone way beyond those narratives years ago about XDC being a scam. You have to move all that mist away and understand that we're still in development stages of all this. Yes, the announcements will come out, but this doesn't just click your fingers and happen overnight. It's great to see the foundations beginning, but there's so much more in the future. And the switch-ons, as we said about the RTGS systems, the ISO compliance is now very much in fruition of the 222, not heavily relating that to XDC in particular. I'm talking about that as the standardization of financial messaging and the back-end framework. This enforces the digitalization of money, tokenization of money with all our banking systems, everything that we can possibly think of in that area. And these years of further development are coming. So I look to the future to say, okay, this is a fantastic opportunity to obtain a great asset and project or technology project in the form of XinFin's XDC token on the trading areas that we can get hold of exchange-wise. I mean, I buy mine on KuCoin, for example, and then I go to my XDC Pay wallet. But you can see that if we were to progress this into the future, let's just take, for example, that 2021 price point back here, all the way up to 20 cents. So even from this current price point, whether you got it at 3.2 cents or the current 5.6 or even 10 cents, there's still great advantage to have in terms of gains. Now, we've circled way back up here a long time ago where we think XDC could get up to in the next bull cycles. Now, a lot of people are saying that's ridiculously conservative. It should be going way above that. But yes, it is conservative, but to the extent of a trading pattern and data, these are the clear targets in my head. Now, I'm not going to be selling any XDC really. I might sell a small portion around this sort of 30 cent mark, but I'm more interested around that 50 cent mark. Will it go beyond that? It's absolutely possible. And I do truly believe that really is dependent on how far down the line come 2025 we are with full integration of everything going on, everything that we talked about in this video, everything in general that you probably research yourselves in the financial world and how we adopt it, utilize it. If that all comes into play, I have no question in my mind that we would go and break those dollar barriers eventually. But for sure, from a realistic terminology in my head, that okay, 2025 is around the corner. Yes, we'll have a bull cycle. Will we have the full adoption that I think we would have? I still think that's a long-term goal, and we might see that more towards 2030. But it's a long game for sure. XDC has been around for some time. Even look at these price points all the way back down here at like 1 cent in 2019. Even 2020 was, you know, very, very low down as well. Sorry, not 1 cent, way below 1 cent. So there's plenty of time here to an extent to accumulate XDC at some really good price points, especially under that 10 cent mark. I always said anything under 10 cents for XDC is an absolute steal for the long term. If you're a short-term trader, you might think slightly differently to that, but you can see clearly, I don't need to tell you this, but there's plenty of opportunity for day traders, weekly traders to take advantage of the I wouldn't call it volatility, but there's a lot of clear movement, quite snappy movement in short bursts of time. So currently at the moment, after this uprise that we had over the last few days, we're now retracting on the RSIs at the bottom left here. 48 on the 14 and 28 is showing 51. That's still slightly high for me, so I'm going to be waiting out a couple of days before I DCA back in. But I do still anticipate, now that news is slightly out of the way, and the market is continuing to be in this low ethos and feel to it, that we might come still to retest this sort of 4.6, 4.7 cent mark. I will definitely be capitalizing on that area. And as I was drawn in the previous videos, it really does make sense to hit those and retest those areas because there's limited data and information around that. as a support level anyway. Albeit that when we do hit these levels, we tend to see resistance and drop back down. We've seen that on the last 2 occasions. Could be an argument soon to show a third one as well. So it did show a bit of support back here on the 24th of July, but the upward trend of XDC's news that came out back then as well was really exciting and intriguing, and it kept that momentum going. But obviously people took advantage. The new news came out, great timing by the way in terms of the percentages and our drawings here, but I do anticipate us to potentially come back down to those areas. So we'll probably see some sideways movements around this sort of 5.4 fib level. If that fails, of course, we'll start trying to dip down to that 4.7 mark. That's where I'm more interested in personally. Will it come down lower than that? It's absolutely possible still as well, because again, looking back at historic data from a trader's perspective, there is just not a lot of data to suggest even like the 3 cent marks are still completely proven. But that might be a bit far-fetched at this moment in time, but at least we've got some areas of interest at least around these particular areas. So I will be having my buy positions around 4.7, maybe slightly lower at 4 cents as well, just in case. And we'll play it by ear. I'm not going to keep predicting the future like I did with this one, of course. But my point being is that we don't know. So we have to do this dollar cost averaging strategy, which works for me personally. So this is where we don't chuck all our money straight in just because we got paid. We do it in incremental percentage values and at different levels because we don't have a crystal ball. So we just go on the measurements of data, or I do at least in terms of data and information I see in front of me. What's going on narrative wise? Do we want to take advantage of that? Yes or no? As I said, personally, I don't. I love to see everyone else making money in this period of time, but for me, I'm just accumulating at these lower areas and I'm just waiting for those bigger numbers in the future over the next coming years. So those RSIs for me right now, I'm just waiting a couple of days, see how that stabilizes, make some moves. On the right hand side, performance wise, it's looking really positive, of course. Great news on 2 occasions this year thus far, which have really accelerated those performance numbers to go into the green significantly on some of these milestone areas. 6 months year to date predominantly, 3 months is showing great strength as well, and even on the weekly that will diminish as the days go by, of course. And that monthly is quite interesting because obviously we had the big uprise and then we had the big drop down, so we're kind of like stabilizing. So I can anticipate that probably just to stay in negative in general. I wouldn't be surprised to see the week go into a negative red as well over these coming days. We'll have to see. But the point being here is that there's a lot of patience here. There's a lot of patience in general of going, well, if all this great news is coming out and it's worth all these market values, blah, 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 why isn't the price rising? And it goes back to my point that the development's going on, the progression's going on for sure, but it's not fully adopted or utilized yet. The fact of the matter is the framework's going in, the narratives are there to suggest and support that XDC is going to be a real big forefronter in not just, I wouldn't call it a race, because I don't think there's just going to be one utilization, one asset being used for any part or sector of the world with blockchain. I think there's going to be a multitude of them for various different reasons, whether that's geopolitical or geolocation, etc. Or it's just purely because we need all these different chains to operate in different formats for different reasons. And XDC would definitely be there, which is why I suggest that don't complain, just purely think of it as an opportunity for accumulation and some future exciting gains to come. It's not financial advice, it's my opinions obviously, but that's the way I see it, and it's the way I'm reacting, and it's the way I'm doing things in the market, which has been working so far. So guys, very exciting times for the XDC XinFin network and foundation. Hopefully you are as excited as I am. Leave your comments below about anything and everything XDC, any other projects and assets you want us to cover. We've got a load of videos to go through over the next few days. So yeah, let's keep an eye on this one, not just from the price point perspective, but XDC's development in this space of trade finance, absolutely huge. And don't forget, we will have imminently the interview with Andre Cosmo. I'm so excited about this. They had a great event over in Texas the last week or so, and it's great to see some thoughts on that, as well as trade finance in general, XDC's application to that, TradeFi, the TFDI initiatives, etc. So keep an eye out for that one. It's going to be very interesting indeed. But until then, guys, thanks for watching this one. We'll see you in the next XDC video update. Take care. Bye-bye.